Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Matt Latham, board certified master arborist, and welcome to Ask an Arborist live Q&A. We're doing things a little bit different today. I wanted to have kind of a special little announcement for you guys because we've got this massive storm coming in here in Texas and surrounding. Really, it's going to cover a very, very, very large portion of the U.S. And some of you are already in the midst of it. So maybe a little late for you. I hope it's not. But just wanted to come in here and give you kind of a couple of little pieces of advice uh, for this upcoming freeze. Because here's the thing: is we've had some really really crazy warm weather here in Houston, Texas, over the past really the past couple of months. It has only dropped down to freezing once. And that was like just barely grazed 32. I think it was like 31.6 or something. And so what happens is our trees, because it's been in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they're not used to it. They are thinking right now that it is springtime because all of the environmental signals are there for it. And so you want to be very, very cautious with this freeze because of the warm weather that we've had. The trees are going to be confused. They're going to have a lot of those resources are going to be above ground in the actual trees, above ground plant parts. And then you get a big freeze come in, and that water inside of the tree freezes, and that can cause what we call frost cracking. It can do even significant damage to your trees, leaves and branches, and even the root system, y'all. So, just a couple of quick things that I wanted to go over with you guys. First and foremost, give me 1 second here. Let me go ahead and post this over to our Ask an Arborist group. All right, there we go. So, the thing about freezes and the damages produced thereof, you often don't see them until many, many months or even years later. So it can be kind of tricky, kind of deceptive. And so that's why I wanted to bring this to you, is because you got to be prepared. You may not even know that your trees are going to have trouble with it, but the damage can do the it can be damaged all the same regardless. And so a couple of things. First of all, roots are going to be the most vulnerable part of the tree. So if you don't have mulch, this would be a great time to go out in Home Depot or Living Earth if you're here in Texas or wherever. Get some good solid mulch, some good organic mulch if you can find it, and put that down. You want to do like a 2 to 4 inch layer right around the critical root zone, especially if you've got like tropical trees or citrus trees, palms, things like that. See, the thing is rapid temperature swings where it goes from like warm to freeze to warm to freeze again. That's what causes all these problems. And by having that layer of protection on the ground, that's going to help the roots be preserved. The other thing too is you want to know about sun scald on trees. So right now your trees they're kind of naked. A lot of them, not all of them, of course. Some of them are your evergreen trees. They just stay evergreen. That's fine. But a lot of your deciduous trees are naked. But because they're sending all those resources up, because it's confused, because it's been so warm, a lot of times what'll happen is, especially on the south side, you'll get what happens, the south and the west sides really of the trunks is, and especially on thin barked trees too, is the frost, the warm comes, the freeze comes, and then now a lot of that tissue can be damaged and it can be prone for that next warming cycle, because this is not going to last long. And it's really those extreme moisture, those extreme temperature fluctuations that really cause a good portion of the problems. And so that's just another thing to consider. So if you've got a brand new tree or a tree with like a really thin bark, like citrus trees, like sycamores, like younger ones and things like that, there's a lot of them. Palms obviously are going to have thinner bark and not as much protection there. So the ones that are going to be most at risk is again those stress trees, citrus trees, palms, tropicals, marginal species. Trees in raised beds, believe it or not, because the roots are kind of exposed on the sides. So let's say you've got your ground here and your raised bed here. Well, that's a bad example, but let's use another one. So here you got your raised bed here. Well, all the sides of that are exposed now, and so they're going to be a lot more prone to be damaged by the freezing. and especially the fibrous roots as they get to the edge of that root ball, that raised bed container. They're going to be just way more exposed to the wind and elements. So let's talk now maybe a couple of things that you'll see with winter damage afterwards. Is number one, often you'll see like leaf burning or browning after a freeze. You'll see like limbs dying back. Sometimes you'll see like cracked bark, even, especially if it freezes really quickly after it warms up a little. And especially if it like warms up during the morning and then it cools down in the afternoon. That can happen really quick, and you'll see those vertical splits that happen all along the trunk. A little bit more common up north, but down here in the dirty south is, again, like I said, we've had really confusing weather. And so the trees are really confused, and I really am a little concerned that this is going to have a big effect on them. So the other thing, a couple things you might see too is like mushy or blackened buds. So if your tree is budding out right now and the winter comes, the big freeze-mageddon comes, and it unalives those buds, then what'll happen often is you'll see them kind of shrivel up and look like mushy or blackened. That's usually not a good sign, and especially if you see that after this freeze, you want to make sure to get a good arborist in to look at it. We're happy to help remotely at arboristondemand.com. We do like telemedicine for trees, of course, and so if you need a closer look at it after this, feel free to hit us up. We'd love to schedule a little 15-minute consultation, figure out what exactly is going on with your trees, how the freeze may have impacted them, and start getting you on the road to recovery there. So, but a lot of times too is let's fast forward a month or two when spring starts to come. If your tree does have winter damage, a lot of times that can be you'll have trouble with the leaves coming back out. It looks like it may not be alive, but you can always do that scratch test to test it and see. If you don't know what the scratch test is, go over to our YouTube channel at Arborist on Demand and just look up scratch test under our page there. So a couple things you could do before the freeze. Now this is really, really important. There's like two things that I say, like if you do these things, then you're almost guaranteed the trees and your shrubs and trees and all that are going to be fine. Of course, there's exceptions, but if you water like 24 to 48 hours beforehand, that's going to do a couple things. First of all, it's going to insulate the ground a little bit more. So you guys up north where you got that permafrost, this is not going to work very well. But down here in the south where we do have those seasons and we have, the soil's not completely frozen, what that does is it insulates it because water takes a little bit longer to cool down. And so then the dirt does. It's just less dense. And so if you've got a high moisture level in there, then that's just going to help out tremendously at insulating the roots. But the other thing too is whenever you do that, that's going to jumpstart the tree. The tree is going to start producing things that can actually help to decrease the freezing point of the tree itself. And so specifically inside of the cells. So cells, just like in our body, all of our cells are filled with water. You've probably heard that like 78% or 80% of our bodies are made of water, and that's intercellular. That's inside of the cells primarily. So you take a cell and you've got like water in it, and that makes up 80, 70%, whatever. And then you multiply that up. That's why they say that is within each cell of the tree, same exact thing. You've got a high concentration of water. When you lose that water, like during extreme drought, that's when trees get really prone to disease and infection. So what happens is when they get extra water, that 24 to 48 hours before cold hits, and now the cold comes, they're going to start producing what we call glycol-like compounds. And what those are is essentially like propylene glycol is essentially antifreeze. That's what the major ingredient in antifreeze is propylene glycol. By the way, those vapes that you kids are hitting, a lot of that's propylene glycol too. So I wouldn't do that. You're not a car. You don't need antifreeze in your body. But trees produce their own. They produce these glycol-like proteins, and basically what it does is it lowers the freezing temperature, the freezing point inside of each one of those cells. And that's going to be super critical because it's being lowered, even if it does have some growth in the upper canopy and the tree started to respond to all these spring-like weathers we've had, then that really can do a wonderful job of just making it bulletproof, making it a lot less likely to freeze and get damaged during this freeze. And of course, your smaller trees, your younger trees, your tropical trees, you absolutely want to go ahead and cover them with some sort of breathable fabric. Don't use plastic. I cannot stand that. You see these landscapers come in and they'll just buy like hundreds of feet worth of landscape, or not even landscape, like tarp material, like plastic. What happens is, yes, it does do a great job of blocking the wind, but it also transfers heat and cold very rapidly. So you can actually lose it very quickly. It's actually better if you've got a really windy day to cover it in plastic, but not by much, because fabric is just going to be a much better way to do that. And they do make landscape fabrics. They make burlaps that you can use, things like that. But one of the cool things that I really love, and this is just, one example I got recently. I actually wanted an auction, but it's like burning my hands right now. This is called heater tape, and it's like it's too freaking hot for me to hold it. But basically, it's got a heating element inside of there. You plug it in, and then you let it run its course. Wrap it around those tropical trees and those palm trees. It's like freaking hot, y'all. And of course, make sure it doesn't start a fire. Make sure you're not gonna have issues there, of course. But you can get it on Amazon. It's usually like 30-50 bucks for a roll of it. But it's going to be really beneficial because it's going to generate heat. And then if you wrap that tree or that palm or whatever in a burlap or some sort of fabric, that's going to trap that heat in. This is what I do with all my tropicals every year. My last year we had a big freeze, and I thought it'd be fun to try it on a bottle brush tree. And if you know bottle brush trees, they it's very tropical. They do not like the freeze at all. And I wrapped it in there, and apparently every one of my neighbors has one of those too. And mine was the only one that made it. It's gorgeous. I'll maybe post pictures here in a minute, but gorgeous during the spring when it came out. Those big red blooms. And it's really important not to prune right before a freeze, because that exposes that tissue inside. Oftentimes the tree will start to produce new buds as a reaction to the pruning, and so that can cause more damage that way. Now, let's say we get through the freeze, you've done all these things. What do you want to do afterwards? Well, first and foremost, don't panic prune. I see that all the time. People come in and they see a brown portion of the tree, so they cut it, and then inside that cut they realize that tissue wasn't unalived yet. And then sure enough, it turns out maybe you could have preserved most or all of the tree. The other thing you do not want to do, absolutely do not do, is fertilize right after. Don't do that. So bad. That can be really detrimental because let's say your tree, a lot of the problem with freezing and winter damage is actually desiccation. It's drying out. And so whenever you fertilize, a lot of those chemical fertilizers are salts. And my 7th or 8th grade science teacher used to get us saying, she'd say, salt takes water out of cells. I still remember that little jingle from back in the good old days. And that's the thing about it, is whenever you apply those salt fertilizers, they can dry out the roots even further. And if you've got a stressed tree, that can really put the nail in the coffin. You don't want to do that. And of course, wait for clear signs of survival or failure. Spring is when you're going to notice that most of the time. Sometimes you can do the little scratch test. Again, I'll post that video here in just a bit. But you can do the scratch test and see if it's green or not. But what you really want to do is wait till spring. Don't go panic pruning, y'all. You can cut down a perfectly healthy, thriving, living, whatever portion of your tree. So now, another thing I want to talk about is when to call an arborist, because large trees near your homes and structures, these can be really big problems. And we don't want our tree that just came through this freeze-mageddon to have problems. A big storm comes, big wind comes. Now you've got problems. So if you've got a tree that's near the house or potentially could fall and cause damage to your personal property, or especially you or your family, then you might want to get somebody to look at it after a freeze. Like this one, especially if you've got like cracks. If you've got major limbs failing, let's say we get some ice damage accumulate and limbs fail, then you'd certainly want to have a good qualified arborist come out and take a look at it and start putting together a restoration plan. If you get big cracks, especially along the trunk tissue or the primary branches, definitely get an arborist out there to look at that. If let's say spring comes and your tree doesn't leaf out like it's supposed to, and let's say you got an ash tree in the front yard and your neighbor has an ash tree down the street and their ash tree does leaf out, but yours doesn't, that may be a really good sign to bring in a good qualified arborist. And of course, if you get this consecutively, like some areas, they get winter every single year. Trees are used to it. They go through that normal cycle. But if you're in an area like me, where Houston, we don't get these freezes very often, and now all of a sudden we are more recently, is that's going to really start to build up. So if you're in the South or a little more sensitive place like that, then and you get like year after year after year, all these different freezes come in. You definitely want to get in somebody to just give the tree extra resources and make sure that he's not getting overwhelmed with all these different stressors. So it's a good time, is especially if you've got multiple events like this, or let's say multiple events like drought events, and then a hurricane event that does breakage, and then a freeze. Like those cumulative effects, we actually call it the mortality spirals. Like one stressor leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And that's what causes a tree to fail. Just like humans, as we get older, entropy starts to happen. Let's say maybe our organs aren't working as efficiently as they normally do. And then you get a disease, and the disease kind of stresses your body out. And then you get another disease and another disease. And eventually, most of us don't make it past 100. And a lot of that's entropy, and a lot of that's just cumulative stress. So I hope that helps. The main thing is winter damage is often not just an above ground problem. It's not just a leaf problem or a branch problem. A lot of times it's the root. So don't forget that. Make sure to water. If you've got some extra mulch lying around, go ahead and put that down, or run over to your hardware store and do a good job, especially if you've got a younger tree or some sort of tropical plant, things like that. You're going to want to baby them a little bit more. And of course, you got to understand too that what you do now in preparation for and during this freeze is actually going to have a long-term effect. These things the tree remembers forever. And in fact, if you've studied dendrology, you can look at tree rings and you can tell what years, based on the amount of growth, how a tree was doing a certain year. You can even see when damages were done throughout the tree. So all of these things are going to have an effect. So if you prepare now, get your tree really healthy and thriving, and make sure that he's good for this freeze, and you even warm up some of your tropicals and cover them up and protect them. You're really going to have a much bigger difference and a bigger impact. So you have to have less problems later on. So do those things. Again, mulch, water your tree. If you've got tropicals, make sure to wrap them in that heater tape or even some kind of incandescent string lighting. If you got a heat lamp, even better. Bring in your potted plants, of course, if you've got trees that are, especially like tropicals and more sensitive plants. Go ahead and bring them in if you can, and the rest of them, just cover them up and maybe say a prayer or two. It doesn't hurt. So, hey guys, I really hope that helps. If you have questions, go ahead and drop photos or questions here in the comments. You can always email them to info@arboristondemand.org. And of course, head over to our YouTube channel. Follow us on the tubes of you at Arborist On Demand for real tree advice from a BCMA like me. Hey, thanks so much for watching, guys. Y'all have a great day, and I hope you make it through this storm. We will see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye. Oh, and like this video, you guys, if you don't mind. That would be amazing. We'll see ya.